Larry stood beneath the arch of polished crystal as another suitor approached, his posture perfectly aligned, his expression carefully neutral, as if emotions were an outdated feature removed in the latest evolutionary update. The ceremonial scanners hovered between them, humming softly with the authority of ancient algorithms that had not been questioned in several thousand years, mostly because questioning them required paperwork, and no one was that brave. The male inclined his head. "Lyrie," he said, as though testing whether her name might cause him physical harm. "That is still my name," she replied calmly, folding her hands behind her back to keep from fidgeting. Her long ears tilted slightly, catching the faint fluctuations in the scanner's tone. She had learned to read those sounds better than most could read expressions. It was a useful skill, considering how rarely anyone bothered to show her one. The scanner pulsed once. Then again. A pause followed, long enough to suggest either deep calculation or mild confusion, both equally concerning. The male's gaze shifted subtly toward the device, then away, then back again, as if hoping it might reconsider out of politeness. It did not. "I regret," he began, already stepping back, "that our genetic harmonics are incompatible," Larry finished, offering a small, practiced smile. "Yes, I've heard. Frequently. Sometimes with more creative vocabulary, but the meaning is consistent." He hesitated, clearly unprepared for her efficiency. "Yes, well, I wish you statistical improvement." With that, he turned and walked away, his departure as precise as his arrival. Larry exhaled slowly. "Statistical improvement," she muttered under her breath. "I should start collecting these phrases, perhaps publish them. Elegant ways to say absolutely not." Above her, the council observers remained silent, their presence heavy despite the distance. They recorded everything, every interaction, every rejection, ensuring that tradition was preserved with meticulous care. Tradition, Larry often thought, was simply a polite word for repeating mistakes with confidence. Another chime echoed through the hall, another suitor. She resisted the urge to sigh too loudly. There were expectations regarding decorum, and apparently audible despair was considered inelegant. The next male approached more quickly, as though hoping speed might improve his chances. It did not. The scanner barely completed its first cycle before emitting a tone so flat it bordered on insult. The male blinked. "Ah, I appear to have left my ship S oven on," Larry offered helpfully. He froze. "Yes, precisely that. Of course. A common issue." He nodded with visible relief and retreated, nearly colliding with a decorative pillar in his haste. Larry watched him go, her expression softening into something that almost resembled amusement. Almost. Her ears shifted again, catching a different sound this time, distant, unfamiliar. Not the controlled hum of their technology, but something uneven, slightly chaotic, like a machine that had opinions. The great doors at the far end of the hall opened with a delay that suggested they disapproved of being interrupted. A figure stepped through, noticeably less symmetrical than everyone else present. His posture lacked precision, his gaze moved too freely, and his clothing, if it could be called that, seemed designed without any respect for ceremonial balance. A murmur rippled through the observers. "Human," someone whispered, as if identifying a rare and mildly dangerous species. Larry tilted her head, studying him. He didn't move like the others, didn't pause to align himself with the architecture or adjust his expression to match expectations. He simply walked forward, looking around with open curiosity, as though the entire hall were an interesting puzzle rather than a sacred space. He stopped a few steps away from her, blinking once as his eyes met hers. For a brief moment, neither spoke. Then he smiled, not politely, not ceremonially, just smiled. "Hi," he said. "Quick question. Is everyone here always this tense, or did I arrive during some kind of universal bad day?" Larry stared at him. Then, despite everything, the scanners, the observers, the weight of countless rejections, she laughed. The sound of Larry's laughter lingered longer than it should have, echoing faintly against the crystal arches like something slightly illegal. The observers above did not react immediately, which was, in its own way, more alarming than outrage. The human blinked, clearly pleased with himself. "I'm going to assume that means bad day," he said, glancing up at the hovering scanners. "Those things always judging people, or just me?" "They judge everyone," Larry replied, recovering her composure with effort. You are simply new to the experience. Great, I was worried I'd have to earn it. He stepped closer, peering at the scanner as it adjusted its position toward him. So what does it do? Compatibility, threat level, sandwich preference, genetic harmonics, she said. It determines suitable bonds according to ancient parameters. Ancient parameters, he repeated. That's usually code for no one remembers why, but we're afraid to stop. The scanner pulsed, louder this time, as if mildly offended. A series of tones followed, irregular, uncertain. Lyri's ears angled forward, catching the inconsistency immediately. She frowned. That is not a standard pattern, she murmured. Is that good or bad? He asked. It is confused. Excellent. I specialize in that. Above them, the observers began to shift. Quiet signals passed between them, light flickering along their interfaces. Confusion was not part of the process. The system was not designed to hesitate. The scanner emitted another tone, higher now, almost questioning. Then it stopped entirely. Silence. The human leaned back slightly. Did I break it? No one has ever broken a ceremonial scanner, Lyri said, though her voice lacked its usual certainty. First time for everything, he replied. I'm Elias, by the way, professional mistake maker. Lyri, she said, professional incompatibility. Nice to meet you, Lyri, professional incompatibility. Despite herself, she smiled again, smaller this time, but real. The silence above them shattered as one of the observers descended, their form gliding with controlled urgency. Step away, the elder commanded, their voice amplified, layered with authority and mild panic. Elias raised his hands slightly. I promise I didn't touch anything. I've been very respectful of the floating judgment orb. This interaction is not authorized, the elder continued, ignoring him entirely. The human must be removed. Lyri stepped forward before she fully understood why. On what grounds? She asked. The elder turned toward her. On all grounds. That is not a category, she replied. It is sufficient. Elias leaned slightly toward her. I like you, he whispered. You argue with vague authority figures, that's a rare talent. Be quiet, she muttered, though there was no real force behind it. The elder's gaze sharpened. Your condition is already destabilizing the order. This anomaly is unacceptable. Lyri felt something shift inside her, something unfamiliar and sharp. My condition, she said slowly, has always been described as a failure. Now it is a threat. Difference is always a threat, the elder replied. Elias tilted his head. That seems inefficient. You're basically saying anything new is dangerous. That must make innovation very awkward. We do not require innovation, the elder said coldly. Right, Elias nodded. That explains the judging orb. The scanner suddenly flickered back to life. Its light unstable, patterns cascading too quickly to follow. Lyri's breath caught as she listened, really listened. Beneath the chaos, there was structure, not rejection, not compatibility as defined by her people. Something else. The tones aligned for a brief second, forming a harmony so unexpected it felt almost deliberate. Then the scanner went dark. Complete silence followed, heavier than before. The observers froze. Lyri did not. What did it detect? She asked quietly. No one answered. Elias looked between them. I'm guessing that's not a normal no. Lyri met his gaze, her ears slowly tilting toward him, as if drawn by a signal she did not yet understand. No, she said. It is not. The silence did not last. It fractured. Signals burst across the chamber, not just from the observers above, but from beyond the hall itself, external channels forcing their way into the system. Symbols flared midair, ancient treaties and warnings surfacing like ghosts that had been waiting for an excuse to matter again. Lyri stood still, but for the first time in her life, stillness did not feel like surrender. What did it detect? She asked again, her voice steady now. The elder hesitated, and that alone was enough to confirm everything. Elias leaned slightly closer. That's never a good sign, he whispered. When the all-knowing authority pauses, something interesting is happening. It identified a bond, the elder said at last, each word forced into existence. One that should not be possible. Yet here we are, Elias replied. Doing impossible things. I had a feeling today would be productive. It is forbidden, the elder snapped. Lyri's ears tilted back, then slowly forward again, as if recalibrating. According to which law? She asked. All of them. Convenient, Elias muttered. The chamber doors opened again, but this time not with reluctance, with urgency. Figures from other worlds entered, their forms varied, their technologies unfamiliar even to Lyrie. Representatives, witnesses, or perhaps opportunists. The signal was received, one of them said. A cross-species harmonic anomaly. This concerns us all. Of course it does, Elias sighed. Nothing like galaxy-wide attention to make things awkward. Lyrie felt the weight of their gazes, but it no longer pressed her down. For so long, she had been invisible unless being rejected. Now they saw her and feared what they saw. She must be isolated, another voice insisted. The human removed. This cannot be allowed to propagate. Propagate? Elias repeated. I'm not a virus. I'm barely organized enough to be a problem. Lyrie almost smiled, but her focus remained sharp. You fear change, she said, louder now. You call it instability, anomaly, threat. But your systems did not reject this bond. They failed to understand it. They are not designed to understand it, the elder replied. Then they are incomplete. That word landed harder than any accusation. For a moment, no one spoke. Elias looked at her, really looked this time, not with curiosity but with something steadier. So what do we do? He asked quietly. Lyrie considered the question and realized she no longer needed permission to answer it. We choose, she said. The chamber stirred again, tension rising, but it felt different now. Not like a wall closing in, but like something about to break. This union is prohibited, the elder warned. Lyrie stepped forward anyway. Then your laws are outdated. A ripple moved through the gathered delegates. Elias exhaled. I was hoping you'd say something like that. You understand what this means? Lyrie asked him. Not completely, he admitted, but I understand enough. You've spent your whole life being told you don't fit. I've spent mine ignoring instructions. Feels like a compatible skill set. She let out a quiet breath, almost a laugh. Then, without ceremony, without scanners, without permission, she reached for his hand. Nothing exploded. No alarms sounded. The systems around them flickered, struggling to categorize what they could not define. It begins, one of the delegates whispered, though whether in fear or awe was unclear. Lyrie felt it then, not rejection, not absence, but connection, not imposed by tradition, not filtered through ancient code. Chosen. For the first time, she was not adapting to fit a system. The system was being forced to adapt to her. Elias glanced around at the stunned assembly. So, he said, is this the part where we accidentally change the galaxy? Lyrie met his gaze, her expression calm, certain. Yes, she said, but not by accident. The silence that followed was no longer oppressive. It was open. And somewhere within it, something vast and old began, finally, to change. The chamber did not return to order. It adapted, reluctantly at first, like an old machine forced to run a new program it had spent centuries refusing to install. Days passed. Though days was a generous translation for the chaotic cycle of negotiations, arguments, and one particularly dramatic protest involving a delegate who attempted to resign from existence. Lyrie attended all of it, no longer as an anomaly under observation, but as a participant whose presence could not be ignored. Elias attended too, though his role was less defined. At one point, he was officially labeled unpredictable variable, which he insisted on repeating proudly. I've been called worse, he told Lyrie, usually by people who knew me longer. You are handling this unusually well, she noted as they stood overlooking the vast city, its structures glowing with synchronized precision. I'm improvising, he said. Humans are excellent at that. It's how we survived things like chairs with unclear purposes. She tilted her head. Chairs. Don't worry about it. Long story involves falling. Despite everything, she laughed again, easier now, without hesitation. It felt different than before. Not like a rare accident, but something she could choose. Behind them, the council chamber continued its transformation. The ancient scanners had not been discarded, but they were no longer unquestioned. Their data was being studied, challenged, expanded. Entire teams argued over the harmonic anomaly that refused to behave like an error. It wasn't a failure, Lyrie said quietly. It was a limitation. Elias nodded. Yeah, big difference, one you can fix. She looked out across the horizon, her ears catching the layered hum of a civilization in transition. For so long, she had believed she existed at the edge of her world. Now she understood she had been standing at its threshold. You changed everything, one of the elders said from behind them, Lyrie turned, meeting the gaze without lowering her own. Once, that would have been unthinkable. No, she replied. I revealed what was already possible. The elder studied her, then Elias, then the city beyond. There will be resistance. There already is, Elias said. But that's kind of how change works. Loud, uncomfortable, and full of people saying, this is a terrible idea, right before it becomes normal. The elder exhaled slowly. And this bond, what do you intend to do with it? Lyrie did not hesitate. Live it. A pause followed. Not disapproval, not acceptance. Something in between, uncertain but no longer closed. The elder inclined their head slightly, then turned and left without another word. Elias watched them go. That felt like progress. It was, Lyrie said. He glanced at her hand, still resting in his. So, no exile. She shook her head. No exile. Good, he said. I just got here. They stood in silence for a moment, but it was no longer heavy. The galaxy had not collapsed. The laws had not shattered into chaos. They had bent just enough to let something new exist. Lyrie felt it clearly now, the absence of that quiet weight she had carried for so long. The certainty that she did not belong. It was gone. In its place was something unfamiliar but steady. Choice. She turned to Elias. You asked if you would change the galaxy. Yeah, he said, still waiting to see how that turns out. She gave a small, knowing smile. It already has. Far above them, networks recalibrated, treaties rewritten, definitions expanded. Not perfectly, not completely, but undeniably. Elias followed her gaze upward. You think they'll figure it out? Eventually, she said. They will have to. He nodded, satisfied with that answer. Good, because I'm not great at explaining things. Lyrie's ears shifted gently as she looked back at him, her expression calm, certain, and finally free of doubt. For the first time, she was not waiting to be chosen. She already had been, and more importantly, she had chosen back.